For weeks, the galaxy's empires have been operating as usual, indifferent to any threat beyond their borders. The Rylathian Empire, a sprawling dominion that has controlled vast stretches of space for centuries, has seen no reason to be concerned. Its military is unmatched, its technology unparalleled. From the glittering capital city on their homeworld to the towering warships that patrol the farthest reaches of their territory, the Rylathians are at peace, basking in their own sense of invincibility. But the quiet hum from the edge of their empire begins to grow louder. It's faint at first, so faint that it might have been dismissed as interference or a glitch. But a young Rylathian technician, stationed at one of the Empire's lesser monitoring posts, isn't so quick to dismiss it. She listens again, her fingers hovering over the controls. The signal is unlike any she has encountered before. It's not just strange, it's human. Her heart races as she runs a series of diagnostics, checking the equipment, double-checking the data. The signal is faint but unmistakable. It's a strange frequency, not something she's seen in any of the known communications from other species. It shouldn't be here. It can't be here. The humans, Earth, haven't made any moves on the galactic stage in over 1,000 years. They're barely even on the radar of galactic politics. This signal is impossible. Her pulse quickens as she alerts her superiors. They don't believe her at first. The Rylathian Empire has existed for millennia, and the idea of a threat coming from a distant, insignificant planet like Earth is laughable. But as the data comes through, more technicians start to take notice. There is something unusual about this transmission, something too precise, too well structured to be an accident. The humans may have been silent for centuries, but they've just sent a signal that is too deliberate to ignore. The technicians work feverishly, trying to isolate the source of the signal. There's no immediate answer. The signal is too faint, like a whisper in the vastness of space. But after several hours, they finally identify its origin. The farthest reaches of the Rylathian Empire, bordering the uncharted regions. What's more unsettling is that the signal appears to be an encrypted message, a warning, perhaps, or a challenge. As more and more systems across the Empire report similar anomalies, the Rylathian High Command grows uneasy. The signal is growing stronger, more defined. It isn't just noise or a random signal. It's a message, something deliberate and designed. But what does it mean? Who sent it? The Rylathians might have brushed off the signal as insignificant if it were anyone else, but not humans. The species they had forgotten about. The species they had assumed would never be a factor in galactic affairs again. And yet here they were. The warning spreads across the Empire's communication channels. Human tech is coming. It's not a threat. At least, not in the traditional sense. But something about it sends a chill down the spines of every Rylathian officer. It's a message of intent, an omen, and the galaxy has no idea what's about to happen next. The Rylathians had spent weeks analyzing the strange signal, trying to decipher its meaning. The message was unnerving, but they still couldn't fully understand what it implied. Who could have sent such a signal? And why now? Earth, the home of humanity, had been a backwater planet. Its people were primitive compared to the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. The thought that humanity had developed anything capable of threatening the Rylathian Empire was unthinkable. Yet the signal had been undeniable, and now the entire empire was on edge. Then, as if to answer their uncertainty, the Nightshade appeared. It was almost as if the ship materialized out of thin air. The Rylathian fleet had been patrolling their outer territories, unaware of anything that could challenge their dominance. That's when it happened. A massive object, dark as a void, slipped into their region of space, silent, invisible, and completely undetectable by the Rylathian sensor systems. The first warning came only when the shadowed figure appeared on the edge of the fleet's vision, too late. For a brief moment, no one knew what to do. The sensors, designed to pick up every motion, every flicker of energy in space, failed completely. The ship didn't just appear, it was the void. No readings, no energy signatures, Nothing. It was as though the ship itself was outside the boundaries of known physics. The Rylathian flagship, once the pride of their empire, was the first to be affected. The Nightshade didn't strike with a great show of force. There was no grand explosion, no dramatic display of overwhelming firepower. Instead, it approached the flagship with ghostly precision. Within moments, a series of controlled energy pulses disabled the ship's communications, its shields, its weapons. The crew aboard the flagship struggled to understand what was happening, frantically attempting to regain control. But it was futile. The Nightshade seemed to anticipate every move, every attempt to fight back, as if it were an extension of the void itself. In a single, silent strike, the flagship went dark, drifting helplessly in space. The Rylathian fleet, already on edge, panicked. Ships swarmed the area, but the Nightshade moved with a terrifying fluidity, slipping between them like a shadow, never once detected. It wasn't fast in the traditional sense, but its movements were perfect, its positioning flawless. The Rylathians couldn't catch it. They couldn't even see it. One by one, the warships tried to retaliate, only to meet the same fate. Each attempt ended in failure. The Nightshade didn't engage in prolonged combat. It didn't need to. It struck with surgical precision, disabling ship after ship, cutting through the fleet with no effort. By the time the first ship's wreckage floated in space, the Nightshade was already gone, vanishing into the blackness of space as silently as it had come. The Rylathian Empire was left in stunned disbelief. How could this happen? They had the finest detection technology in the galaxy. They had the best ships, the most advanced weapons, and yet they had been completely outclassed by something that shouldn't even exist, something they didn't even see. A single question echoed throughout the Rylathian fleet. What had they just encountered? And how many more of these invisible warships were out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the galaxy to realize what had just arrived? Back on Earth, humanity's leaders watched the events unfold with cold, calculated precision. The Nightshade was just the first step in a plan that had been years in the making. While the galaxy's empires had been content to watch from afar, thinking Earth was little more than a primitive, resource-rich planet, humanity had been quietly preparing. The signal that the Rylathians had intercepted was only the beginning of a revelation that would shake the foundations of galactic power. The truth was that humanity had been developing technology far beyond what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had ever imagined. Earth's most brilliant minds had come together in secret, driven by a single purpose: to build a force that would make the galaxy take notice. They had studied, reverse-engineered, and outpaced every technological breakthrough ever known to the galaxy. The result was a warship unlike any other, the Nightshade, a stealth vessel so advanced that it seemed almost supernatural. The Nightshade wasn't just a ship, it was the pinnacle of human ingenuity. Powered by an engine capable of manipulating quantum fields, it could bend light and sound, making it undetectable to even the most sophisticated sensor systems. Its hull was constructed from materials that could absorb and redirect energy, rendering it nearly impervious to traditional weaponry. Its weapons systems were guided by an AI network that could predict enemy movements and react before anyone even realized an attack was coming. This wasn't the work of a single genius or a handful of inventors. It was the result of years of collaboration between the brightest minds from every corner of Earth. Governments, military leaders, and scientific communities had all played their part in this secretive endeavor. The Nightshade was their gift to the galaxy, a message to anyone who thought Earth was too insignificant to matter. But the Nightshade was only the beginning. The ship's technology had already been replicated in several other prototypes, and more were under construction in hidden facilities across Earth's orbit. The true scale of humanity's potential had only just begun to be revealed, and the galaxy was utterly unprepared for the full scope of what was to come. As the Nightshade continued its silent campaign of destruction, humanity's leaders began to deliberate their next move. This wasn't just about defending Earth. This was about taking control. For centuries, Humanity had been a spectator in the galactic theater, watching as other species dominated the stage. No more. Earth had bided its time, learning the ways of the galaxy, studying its empires, and now it was ready to step into the spotlight. The leaders of Earth knew that revealing their true strength would come at a cost. War would be inevitable. The galaxy's empires would not simply bow to humanity. They would fight back. But humanity was prepared for that. The Nightshade wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement. And now, the entire galaxy would hear it. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and their tech was poised to change the galaxy forever. Whoever stood in their way would learn the true meaning of Havoc. The Rylathian Empire was in full panic mode. The destruction of their flagship had sent shockwaves through their high command, but it wasn't just the loss of a ship that rattled them. It was the realization that they had been utterly powerless to stop the Nightshade. The Rylathians, who had prided themselves on being the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, now found themselves facing an adversary they could neither detect nor predict. In the command centers, senior officers scrambled to develop a strategy. They had no choice but to retaliate, to show the galaxy that the Rylathians would not be cowed. But how do you fight an enemy that doesn't play by any known rules? The first step was to rally the fleet. A full-scale response was organized, one that would bring together the might of the entire Rylathian armada. For weeks, the fleet's commanders plotted the location and expected trajectory of the Nightshade, but they found no trace. Each attempt to detect it ended in failure. No matter what they tried, the ship remained undetectable, a specter haunting their every movement. The Rylathians' most advanced warships, equipped with the most sophisticated sensors in the galaxy, were no match for the Nightshade. Every time a fleet advanced to engage, the mysterious warship was already gone, slipping between their forces like a ghost, leaving nothing but confusion and anger in its wake. And then it struck again. The Nightshade appeared on a desolate mining colony at the edge of Rylathian-controlled space. The colony was lightly defended, with only a few patrol ships standing guard. The Rylathian military had underestimated the humans. They assumed the colony would be of little value. Yet, in a show of precision and ruthlessness, the Nightshade moved in and obliterated it in less than an hour. The colony's defenses were disabled without a single shot fired in retaliation, and the remaining fleet in the sector was left in complete disarray. This time, the Nightshade didn't vanish immediately. It hovered there, its shadow looming over the debris of the colony. It was as if the ship were daring the Rylathians to act, mocking their helplessness. The Rylathian fleet attempted to retaliate once again, but the results were the same. Ships fired their weapons at the black silhouette, but nothing hit. The Nightshade seemed to anticipate every move they made, evading each attack with eerie precision. The Rylathian Empire's top commanders, their pride deeply wounded, were now faced with a terrifying question. Could their empire survive an enemy that could not be defeated? The galaxy's greatest minds were forced to acknowledge the terrifying truth. Humanity's technological edge was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The Nightshade wasn't just a ship. It was a harbinger of something far worse. If the humans could hide their warships with such precision, how many more were out there, waiting in the shadows? As word spread across the galaxy of the Nightshade's latest attack, a deep unease settled over the Empire. The Rylathians were now in full retreat, unable to protect their own colonies, much less mount an effective counteroffensive. The once mighty Empire was reeling, its confidence shattered. Every strategist, every soldier was forced to confront the unthinkable. Earth, the forgotten backwater of the galaxy, had become their greatest threat. And as the Nightshade vanished into the darkness once more, the question that lingered in the minds of every Rylathian officer was simple: how long before humanity decided to turn their sights on something far more valuable than a mining colony? The aftermath of the Rylathian catastrophe spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. The Nightshade had struck again, leaving a trail of confusion, fear, and destruction in its wake. The once unshakable empire was on the back foot, its fleet scattered and ineffective against an enemy they couldn't even detect. And yet, the worst part wasn't the loss of ships or colonies. It was the realization that the galaxy had underestimated Earth. For centuries, humanity had been regarded as a fringe species, too small and primitive to matter. But that was no longer the case. Other empires began to take notice, their leaders and commanders watching the unfolding events with a mix of curiosity and dread. The Elkrin Federation, a coalition of insectoid species, called for immediate diplomatic talks with the Rylathians, hoping to offer some form of assistance. The Sphæran Alliance, known for their pride and aggression, declared a state of readiness across their borders. Even the mighty Xeric Combine, renowned for their technological prowess and brutal conquest, found themselves unnerved. The galaxy's dominant powers, rivals for centuries, were now united in fear of a species they had written off as inconsequential. The fear wasn't just about the Nightshade. It was about the sheer unknown of what humanity might be capable of. If one warship could cause such havoc, what else did Earth have in store? The Nightshade wasn't just an anomaly. It was a sign of something far more dangerous. It was a message. At the heart of the galaxy's paranoia was the realization that humanity's technology was far ahead of anything they had ever seen before. Every major empire had long been working on cloaking technology, stealth weapons, and advanced AI. But none had even come close to achieving what the humans had. How had Earth, a planet that had once been isolated and insignificant, managed to leapfrog centuries of technological development? How had they built a weapon that could move unseen, strike at will, and vanish without a trace? In response, the galaxy's empires began to mobilize. Diplomatic efforts surged, with envoys dispatched to Earth in a desperate bid to understand what the humans wanted, and what they were willing to do. No one dared to ask directly, but the question loomed over every conversation. Would humanity's wrath be contained, or would the Nightshade's terrifying power mark the beginning of an unstoppable tide of destruction? The Rylathians, ever the proud and arrogant empire, had been the first to feel humanity's might, but they would not be the last. The Elkrin Federation, ever vigilant, began constructing new defenses, doubling down on their intelligence networks. The Sphæran Alliance, who prided themselves on their military strategy and elite warriors, began devising their own countermeasures. The Xeric Combine, known for their mastery of warfare, turned to their engineers to study the remnants of the destroyed Rylathian fleet, trying to uncover any weakness they could exploit. Yet, despite their preparations, none of them could shake the same horrifying thought. What if humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just the Nightshade? What if it was their entire arsenal? In the dark corners of their war rooms, the galaxy's leaders knew one thing for sure. They were no longer the dominant powers in the galaxy. Humanity had entered the stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the galaxy's empires scrambled to react to the emergence of humanity as a formidable force, the situation quickly became more complex. The Rylathian Empire, now severely weakened, sought to form alliances with anyone willing to listen, hoping to pool resources and intelligence to confront the new threat. However, distrust ran deep. The once mighty empire was no longer the unquestioned leader, and its reputation had been irrevocably tarnished by the humiliation they had suffered at the hands of the Nightshade. On the other side, the Elkrin Federation, ever the pragmatic diplomats, saw the opportunity to extend an olive branch to Earth. They knew they had little chance of standing alone against the rising power, but if they could make an alliance, it could benefit them strategically. However, their attempts to establish communication were met with silence, a growing reminder that humanity wasn't playing by the old rules of galactic politics. Meanwhile, the Sphæran Alliance, known for their pride and aggressive nature, saw humanity's rise as an affront to their own superiority. The Sphærans had long been the galaxy's most fearsome military force, but the Nightshade had shattered that image in a single stroke. Rather than seeking cooperation, the Sphærans moved quickly to prepare for conflict, pouring resources into expanding their military and enhancing their defenses. There was no room for weakness in their eyes, only the will to crush whatever dared challenge their power. The Xeric Combine, a brutal and technologically advanced empire, took a different approach. While they, too, feared humanity's technological prowess, they saw the Nightshade as a challenge to be overcome. The Xerics, known for their adaptability and relentless drive, were not content with merely defending against Earth's technology. They believed they could capture and reverse engineer the human warship, turning the very weapon that had humiliated the Rylathians into a tool of their own conquest. To them, the Nightshade was both a weapon and an opportunity to assert their dominance once more. But as the galaxy's empires moved forward with their own agendas, the true danger was already taking root in the shadows. While the Rylathians, the Elkrin, the Spherans, and the Xerics quarreled and maneuvered, Earth remained silent. There was no grand declaration of war, no speeches promising vengeance, no hasty calls for action. Humanity simply watched, observing the shifting alliances and watching the rivalries grow. In the quiet corridors of Earth's hidden war rooms, humanity's leaders were already planning their next move, not just to survive, but to dominate. They knew that the galaxy's empires were divided, their alliances fragile at best. They knew that the true strength of humanity lay not just in their technology, but in their ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. The stage was set for a war unlike any the galaxy had seen before. It would be a war of subterfuge, of betrayals and shifting loyalties. One by one, the empires would find themselves forced to decide. Would they stand with Earth, or would they risk everything to destroy it? Humanity's silence was their greatest weapon. In the galaxy's desperate rush to form alliances and bolster defenses, they had failed to see the most dangerous truth of all. Earth's true power wasn't just in their technology. It was in their ability to wait, to watch, and to strike when no one expected it. Months passed since the Nightshade had first appeared, and the galaxy's empires were still scrambling. Tensions were high, and distrust ran deep, but all attempts to reach out to Earth had been met with silence. No ambassador had been sent, no message had been received. It was as if humanity had withdrawn completely from galactic affairs, leaving the rest of the galaxy to wonder what Earth's next move would be. And that silence was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. The empires had prepared in their own ways, fortifying their borders, building fleets, and reinforcing their most vulnerable colonies. But despite all their posturing and alliance building, none of them could shake the growing feeling of vulnerability. The Nightshade had shown them how easily they could be struck, how easily their defenses could be shattered without warning. But it was only a single ship. How many more were out there? Could there be more Nightshades? Or worse, what if Earth had perfected the technology to make an entire fleet undetectable? It was an unsettling thought, and one that no empire could afford to ignore. But just as the galaxy's leaders were grappling with these questions, they were once again thrown into chaos by the sudden, devastating appearance of humanity's technology. It started with the destruction of a Spheran military outpost located on the outer rim of the Spheran-controlled sectors. The outpost, a key logistical hub for the Spheran fleet, was obliterated in a manner almost identical to the Nightshade's previous strikes. No warning, no sign of attack. One moment, the station was operational, and the next, it was a smoldering ruin. All communications from the outpost went dark in an instant, and an entire fleet tasked with its defense was lost before they could even mobilize. But this time, the Spherans did not wait. They immediately dispatched their entire fleet to the location, hoping to find some clue, some evidence of who had struck them. As they arrived, what they saw made their blood run cold. Floating in the debris was a wreck that shouldn't exist, a warship unlike anything the Spherans had ever seen. It wasn't a Nightshade, but it was clear that it was human-made. The ship was sleek and compact, designed for precision strikes. Its dark hull absorbed the light of nearby stars, giving it an eerie, shadow-like appearance. The ship was covered in dense, sophisticated weaponry, with energy pulses radiating from its interior like a dormant beast ready to awaken. There was no sign of life aboard, no crew, no escape pods. It was as though the entire crew had disappeared into thin air. The Sphärans immediately recognized the terrible truth. This wasn't a lone nightshade. Humanity had created a fleet of warships, each capable of causing devastation beyond their wildest imaginations. It was an unseen strike, silent, lethal, and almost ghostly in its precision. As the Sphäran fleet surveyed the wreckage, a message came through on their encrypted channels. It was a single, simple transmission. You were warned. The message was unmistakable. It was Earth's way of saying that they were no longer just a silent observer. Humanity had entered the galaxy's stage, and they would no longer be ignored. The empires had been warned. The first ship had been a harbinger, but this was something far worse. The galaxy's old order was being rewritten, and now, the true force of humanity was being revealed. A single strike had not just crippled one empire. It had sent a message to every ruler in the galaxy. Earth was coming, and they would not be stopped. The destruction of the Sphäran outpost marked the beginning of a new era for the galaxy, a dark era of uncertainty and fear. No longer could the galaxy's empires pretend that humanity was a fleeting or insignificant force. Earth had made its presence known, and its message was clear. The old order was over. In the wake of the attack, the major empires convened in a rare secretive summit. Representatives from the Rylathian Empire, the Sphäran Alliance, the Elkran Federation, and the Xeric Combine all gathered in a heavily fortified space station on the edge of neutral territory. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the weight of the realization that the galaxy was on the brink of a cataclysmic shift. This was no longer about diplomacy or posturing. The stakes were far higher now. The survival of the galaxy's greatest empires was at risk. The Rylathians, still reeling from their earlier defeat, were the first to speak. Their commander, General Thrak, a hardened veteran of countless battles, stood before the council and addressed the room in a voice that trembled with both fear and resolve. "We cannot let Earth continue unchecked," he said. "Our fleets are in tatters. Our colonies lie in ruins, but we still control the heart of the galaxy. We will not fall." The Sphärans, whose pride had been wounded by the silent, unseen strike against their outpost, nodded in agreement. The thought of humanity rising to challenge their dominance was a direct insult to their long-held belief in their superiority. "The Sphäran fleets are already mobilizing," declared High Commander Vexer, his tone cold and resolute. "We will bring humanity to its knees. This nightshade threat will be eradicated. We will prove that our strength cannot be matched." But despite the vocal declarations of unity, the Elkran and the Xerics were hesitant. They had seen the devastation caused by the human warships, and they knew that their own fleets, though powerful, were no match for Earth's advanced technology. The Elkran, known for their careful deliberation and diplomacy, raised concerns. What if humanity does not wish for war? What if their technology was a defensive measure, not an offensive one? High Ambassador Nixie, the representative for the Elkran, asked, "We must consider other options, perhaps a peace offering." The Xeric representative, Supreme Strategist Jorek, scoffed. "Peace, with a species that has shattered the Rylathian Empire and crippled the Sphärans. The only peace that humanity seeks is one where they rule over all of us." A tense silence settled over the room. The council was fractured, with distrust running deep. The growing realization was that no one knew what humanity truly wanted or how far they were willing to go. Earth's intentions remained unclear, but its capacity for destruction had become undeniable. The galaxy was at a crossroads. As the council convened in heated debates, humanity had already set its next moves in motion. Unknown to the empires, the Nightshade's twin warships had been deployed to various strategic points across the galaxy. These new vessels, part of a growing fleet, were quietly slipping into position, ready to strike once more. Humanity had made its statement, But it had not yet fully revealed its hand. The time for diplomacy was over. Earth was no longer an underdog. It had risen, not through brute force alone, but through cunning, technology, and patience. The galaxy had been given a warning, and the question now was whether they could stop what was coming. The reckoning had begun, and the fate of the galaxy rested in the balance.